Today, I have author Grace Fox, and she comes all the way from Richmond, BC. Grace, thank you so much for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I would love to know, in a nutshell, tell me about your newest book, Names of God Living Unafraid. What is this book about?
So it's got 7 names of God, the Hebrew names, just doing a deep dive into where did they first show up in the Old Testament and what was the context. I described a story from my own life of how I've experienced God by that name. I interviewed others to get their stories, did a Bible character, and then how did Jesus fulfill that name to show that he was truly God? So then how do we respond? There's a little section on that. And then I've included questions so that individuals can use it as a Bible study, but people will learn so much more if they do it as a group, or they can share the lessons that they're learning and from their own experiences as well. But then every chapter has a QR code at the end so that readers can access 15 minutes of bonus teaching. It's not just a recap on the chapter, it's brand new information about the name of God, because the more we understand who God is, the better we are able to live unafraid.
That is phenomenal. Speaking of, fear and God, I published a book called Love versus Fear, and it talks about, how if God is love, then how can we live unafraid if we live with God? And so I love this idea of living unafraid. What really prompted you to write a whole book about this?
Oh, because we just live in a day and age where fear is rampant. Years ago, I wrote a book called Moving from Fear to Freedom, A Woman's Guide to Peace in Every Situation, and did a survey of almost 400 women before I wrote the book, just to see what their basic fears were. And the number one fear back then was the fear for our loved ones' well-being. And I thought that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed at all. And the world that we live in just seems to be getting more and more unpredictable. And so everywhere I go, and I travel internationally for missions, but everywhere I go, fear is such a big deal. And in my heart, I went through the scariest thing ever back in the 80s when I gave birth to my second child in Nepal, and she was born with special needs, so we had to get her back. But I was left behind by the airlines because I'd had a C-section and they considered me a medical high risk. So we came back to North America unprepared. Like, we had a baby going into a NICU ward with no healthcare insurance, and we had no job, no house, no car. We had nothing, nothing. We'd been doing missions for 3 years, and we were making like $70 a month. And so we came back to nothing, and it was a perfect storm. So I get what fear is in so many ways. And I just want people to know, because he met me in that moment by reminding me that he would be faithful no matter what happened. He would be faithful. And so I just remember thinking back then, wow, what we believe to be true about God better be true, because when we hit a crisis or we hit a very frightening experience, are we going to be able to anchor in the truth, or are we going to be floundering and blowing all over the place? And so that's that. Back in the 80s, I learned that. And so this whole thing about knowing who God is being the most important thing about us, really, that's been in my head for 40 years. And that's why this is the first of three. That's why this series actually was born.
That is absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And that actually brings me right into my next question, which, obviously people are hearing you were out in Nepal, you had a baby there as well. Tell me a little bit more about your unconventional life and where you even are right now.
Unconventional, I think, would be the word. Yeah, so my husband and I met, married 5 months later, and off we went to Nepal as missionaries. He'd already been accepted by an organization, and I'd sensed God calling me into missions from the time I was in 6th grade. And so it just, the Lord just brought us together, and off we went, and into this crazy living in a mud hut with no electricity, no running water, 12 hours out of Kathmandu. And that's how we began our married life. So we had wanted to spend the rest of our lives there when we came to close to the end of our 3-year commitment. But when Stephanie was born, we had to come back to North America, and God just went whoop and flipped our plans around. So we lived in the States for 11 years when my husband was born and worked, and then went back to the camp where we met on Quadra Island up here in Canada, a little island off the coast of British Columbia. So we worked there for 11 years in the camp ministry, and then the Lord called us to expand those horizons. And now we work with International Messengers Canada. My husband is the Canadian director, and it's a missionary sending agency with about 300 people working in 30 countries. And largely we do evangelistic English learning camps overseas. So 11 years of prep, on the little island there off BC's coast, and now overseas. So we work with missionaries in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe and many other different places.
That is
Oh, and I live
absolutely
on a boat.
amazing.
That's the other thing, the present
Yes.
thing.
Okay, so you
Yes,
live on a
that
boat. Tell me what life like that. I mean, I guess if you lived in a mud hut in Nepal, a boat must be pretty pretty sweet. What is that
that's
like though?
exactly what I said when we just felt the Lord was calling us to this lifestyle. It's not, hey, let's go live on a boat, because wouldn't that be fun? But it's my husband grew up with boating in his background and developed the sailing camp while we were there at that camp on Quadra Island. So sailing is really in his blood, and he's very good at it. But I grew up in Southern Alberta, so as a landlubber girl. So I'm married into this. But, God has been so faithful. When we sensed him asking us to do this, it was like, get rid of your stuff and move on to a boat. And all I felt was, oh boy, okay, okay. Well, if our thought has always been, God, if you're telling us to do this, then the only answer is yes. Just show us the steps. Now provide the boat, provide the wherewithal we need, provide a place to moor it. And he worked it all out, even though every yacht broker within, all the way down to Victoria and up to Campbell River on Vancouver Island and all in the Vancouver area, every yacht broker said it's a 7-year waiting list to find a place to tie a boat up as a liveaboard. And we bought a boat. It was the beginning of January in 2018, and we had a place to tie it up actually 2 weeks before we bought it. And then the place that we really wanted to go to, that opened up the next month. So we know that God put us on the boat, and it's turned into a place of ministry here among an unreached people group.
Wow. Amazing. And I got to ask really quick because I know you're a family woman, so you have a couple kids, you have some grandkids as well. They just come to your boat? Like, is that how you guys
Well,
hang out?
we have 3 kids, all married, and I have 14 grandchildren. And so some, yeah, they come when they can, and we can't have them all on board at the same time. That's been my heartbreak. So that's like, there is a cost to saying yes to God, and that is the cost. And so when we've been able to get together as a family, we've just had to do it at another place. They can't all come to Grandma's house, but we go to one of the kids' places where we can get together, and that we've just had to make those concessions. We talked to them about it before we bought into this, and they knew that that's the way it would have to be. So, but we have had grandpa sleepovers on the boat, and it's just been fun.
That's so incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Back to the book for a moment. We've got Names of God, Living Unafraid. What do you hope readers take from reading your book?
Oh, the one word that kept coming to my mind as I wrote the book was revival, because I really believe that if we could get it, if we could get it, like, who is God, we would fall on our faces before him in awe and in worship. How can we ever think that we're wise enough, smart enough to do life apart from his lordship? We can't. We simply cannot. He is absolutely supreme. There are no other gods before him. Social media is not a god before our God. Relationships, money, position, none of that stuff meets our needs as the one and only God has met our need through Jesus Christ. And when we stop to think about his character as he made known to us through his names, it's life changing. It's absolutely transformational. So revival to wake us up spiritually to the wonder of who God is.
That is amazing. If people are interested in checking out your book or following more along with you, how can they do this?
They can visit my website, gracefox.com. There are a lot of free resources there, free articles and whatnot. If they sign up for my updates, they get a beautiful printable of 7 scripture-based prayers, all based on these 7 names. And the book, they can get an autographed copy on my site, but it's available wherever Christian books are sold.
Fantastic. Grace, you are such a blessing. Thank you for sharing your heart and this new message. Or I shouldn't say it's not a new message, but it's a beautiful message for people to grow their faith. Um, we're going to let people know about it. And I really wish you all the best and hope to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you. Have a great day.